Greetings, Guardians. My name is Bife here. Before we start the video, two really quick things. Yet again, GCX Charity Marathon is coming up. That's going to be on the 15th of July. If you want to go ahead and support, go ahead and turn up for that one. That is going to be live at midday Eastern Standard Time, I believe. So I'll be there for 4 hours raising money for the kids over at St. Jude. Turn up and please give generously. Secondly, quick note about content here on the channel. In about, some point just after Act 2 releases, I am going to take a break, just for a bit. I'm planning content so that everything is away, but Martin and I have both worked really hard to deliver content, and I will be honest, I'm getting to that point where if I go at this tilt for much longer, I will properly start to burn out. So I'm going to go ahead and take some time off, and just make sure that my wife and I have time for each other, and that everybody has time to recuperate. That being said, we're working hard on making sure that we can get content for you all to cover the break. The raid stream we did last week with Fallout, T, CB Grey, Astacross, and Gigs, yeah, that'll be going up at the end of the week. I've also got a video that is a sponsored video with Bungie, which is with regards to the liminality stuff. That will be going up on Friday. And there will be more content coming along as the weeks progress. There's still a lot more stuff for us to cover with Final Shape and Micah. I'm going to be working on getting into the stuff to do with Echoes as Act 2 progresses, but that will take some time. We're not there yet. We're so not there yet. I want to go ahead and make sure I have all of the Final Shape content done and dusted and covered. And at that point, I really want to make sure that we are definitively done with that before we move on to anything to do with Echoes. So yeah, it may take some time, but I'm going to take a break. We'll make sure that I'm actually back up to working standard and that everything is all good when I'm back and ready to rock again. Anyway, today it's going to be a little bit of a quicker video. We're going over the recent live stream that Bungie had, and the aim was to talk about Act 2 of Echoes and the future of episodes that are coming later to Destiny. There's a host of things narratively to speak about, so yeah, we'll go ahead and we'll talk about that. Big news first, right off the bat, is this. With Episode 2 and moving forward into Episode 3, Bungie is going to be experimenting. This is not Act 2 and 3 of Echoes. This is an experiment happening with Revenant and with Heresy. And the experiment is this. Bungie is going to be delivering the story of each act all at once. You'll be playing the full story of each of the story beats right on release day, and there will be no more weekly time gating within each act. You will still need to play Act 2 when Act 2 releases, and Act 3 when Act 3 releases, obviously. However, the weekly cadence is being removed, and this is an experiment Bungie is doing for the sake of allowing people to either play at their own pace in a similar manner to what they've been doing before, or to play through the entire act of the story right then and there. Do note, I made a mistake earlier on Twitter. I made the mistake of thinking that this change was coming to Act 2 and Act 3 of Echoes. That is not the case. This starts in Revenant and Heresy. This is not going to apply to stuff that immediately jumps out from us when Act 2 of Echoes begins. It's something that will begin next episode. I completely understand why that's the case though, because with the way that everything is working out in Echoes, all of the content is already lined up and ready to go, and it's a bit too late to change any of the cadence of that. However, the fact that it's coming from Episode 2 onwards is something I'll talk about in a second. First though, I feel like I owe some of you an apology because my first initial tweet on Twitter was something which got the information wrong and did say Act 2 was where this was starting within Echoes. Not my intention to mislead, entirely my bad. Right off the bat though, let's go ahead and talk about this because it does represent a pretty big shift to how the story of Destiny is being delivered, and it also represents a massive change to the way that things are going to feel narratively each episode, and each act for that matter. In a video I made a few weeks back, I talked about the feedback that I had for episodes, and I referenced a lot of the feedback that Myelin and some other lore community members had for the episode. The core of that feedback was that the weekly cadence and the way that this was delivering the story was really killing some of the good story beats. The presence of the pretty routine steps within the seasonal narrative that forced us to continuously start and end our stories in the helm with whichever seasonal vendor it happened to be that time made the story feel flat and uninteresting at the start and end of each week, and that was a real buzzkill. The story between could be great, but the presence of the weekly cadence was sucking all the enthusiasm out of the room. This change that Bungie is making, where you can play all of the story in each act all at once, means that the narrative is going to be a lot more condensed, and it also means that we're not going to be stuck with that weekly cadence, which is going to sort of ruin the beginning and ending of each week, and it makes the structure feel very samey. We no longer have the seasonal weekly loop that was so frustrating to so many. This looks like a really fast turnaround as far as responding to this feedback is concerned. I know that at base, that's something to be pretty confident about, because in the timeline of narrative feedback, the things we say now, at fastest, tend to only get implemented 9 months out or so. And that's just the way that this works, because the whole process of video game development means that making changes at certain points in time, closer to a release of a game, derails the whole thing and either makes for a bad product or makes it impossible. If you're wondering how Destiny 1 Vanilla happened, who knows, maybe there's some of that to this. The change of cadence here is likely being done because it's possible to respond rapidly to this specific form of feedback, and for that I want to say good on Bungie. Something we should be clear on though is this. This move is an experiment. We're going to be taking an old content cadence from something like Warmind and applying it to a completely new episodic content model in Revenant and Heresy. The result of doing this could be a great balance of both sides to the community and their opinions on how the narrative should be delivered. There are some things I want to try and address with each part of this bit by bit. First of all, for the crowd that hates the seasonal model, who have been vocal the whole time and who are delighted at the ability to breeze through the content at their own pace, there is another crowd out there who will start to complain that after 1 week there is nothing to do. To this particular split in the community, I would like everyone to grapple with the simple fact of reality that neither group is going to be perfectly happy with the way that content is delivered. To some, this will be seen as an end to the drip feed that they hate, and to others, it's going to lead to a period of 6 dead weeks between each act. And for now, though, my recommendation to Bungie is to push forward with this particular delivery of content and this experiment, and in particular to push forward into Heresy with it. And the reason I say that is this. Revenant is probably already mostly written. The quest steps are already probably all done and dusted at this point. If you're pushing those steps together in each act, Revenant might have a few bits of dialogue that just sort of play one after another and maybe feel like there was meant to be a weekly gap between them. That might make Revenant feel a little bit odd in terms of its narrative cadence, but I think with Heresy, they still have time to change those bits and pieces that top and tail what would have been each week's normal story connections. And that means that Revenant's dialogue might feel a little bit pieced together, but Heresy's dialogue will be an actual test of how this feels, where we get 3 big narrative dumps each season, 1 in each act. To get a true idea of how well this can work, I think we are going to need to wait and see it in action with Heresy. So my recommendation to the community is this: regardless of which side you sit on, let Bungie cook with this one. I think the response generally to this change and this experiment has been positive, although there are going to be some people pointing out the alternative view, that now people will simply complain that there's nothing to do for those weeks, and whether or not people actually complain about the lack of narrative content is yet to be seen, but hey, I think the sentiment generally is looking up. I will also remind people in that particular portion of the community that is arguing about one side or another, a portion of the community that I very much was a part of at a certain point, that entire topic is exhausting. I am so tired of talking about it. Let's just let this experiment play out, please. For the love of all that is holy, and for the love of the Traveler. It's taken us a long time to get to the point where we're able to consistently put feedback out there and then get a quick response from Bungie in terms of, hey, these are the changes that we're planning to implement based on that feedback. This is a good loop. This is good. Let's accept for a second that this is also an experiment. It could be the case that this happens and it is not well received, and if that is the case, Bungie is in their rights to say, well, it was an experiment and it went wrong. Let's also accept that if this goes right, this is another building block. This is a stepping stone towards the community and Bungie sitting there talking with each other and giving feedback to build a better game together. This is a good move no matter what, and I know that the experiment might not work out for those of you who were with me all the way back on the seasonal model train, but I think genuinely the balance between having 3 big dumps of story in each episode, 1 per act, might actually be the way forward. Is it going to always be the right call here, and does this address the core problem? Again, I don't think it does in Revenant, because I think a lot of that stuff is already written. I don't know that, but I think it might be. I think we need to wait for Heresy to see that feedback truly get delivered. That is the point at which we'll start to see what the real changes look like and how Bungie's writing has been able to adapt to this new format with the experiment. So again, let's talk about all of that when we've seen both of the other episodes. I'll definitely be giving feedback when it comes to Revenant, and I will definitely be looking at things later on, but we're going to move on from that long, exhausting point. So we're going to talk about Act 2 of Echoes, which there was also some information about. According to Alison Lurs, Bungie's narrative director, Saint is going to be wrestling with a lot of the questions that he faced thanks to his encounter with the Conductor. This is a major plot point for Act 1 that prompted a lot of different and interesting questions, talking about Saint's individuality and whether he is the real Saint because he was pulled from potentially different timelines. It asks a lot of things about the questions of identity, and it challenges the relationship between Saint and Osiris in a new and very interesting way. Whether they overcome that or whether something else happens is unknown, of course, but regardless, it's an interesting take on the plot and an interesting take on the story. I'm really glad to see that they're going to be pushing deeper into this narrative, because it's a very interesting deconstruction of one of Destiny's strongest characters, who sometimes can seem a little bit two-dimensional, given that most of his character revolves around him being a great warrior and him being the lover of Osiris. Now we get to see the deeper facets of Saint in a different light, and I'm very excited for that. As we strive to learn more about the Conductor, we apparently are also going to be revisiting, quote, one of Destiny's most storied locations very briefly.
We are also going to be going back and revisiting one of Destiny's most storied locations very briefly.
So the lore hounds out there are going to have a chance to feast.
They're going to have a delicious time.
Excellent. Bife, you're welcome. I don't know if this will warrant another 10 hours, but we'll leave that up to you.
I got you, Boo.
Perfect. Okay.
Hey, that's neat. Thanks, Alison. To clarify, I am definitely not doing a 10-hour thing on anything anytime soon, but you can expect 4 hours of raid lore when that stream goes live. That'll be probably on Sunday. Either way, what location could all of this possibly be hinting to? Well, we know we've been there before. I think it's got to be something related to the Vex, obviously, and given that we're dealing with Saint 14, it might potentially be referring to somewhere back in the Infinite Forest, maybe somewhere where we jumped in and found Saint as he was potentially dying. Then again, that would require us to properly return Mercury, which I don't believe has been done yet, and also it means us venturing back to a place where lots of interesting timeline-based shenanigans have been going on. It's not impossible to see, but it's also not something I'm putting up there as likely, because I think there are a few other potential strong contenders. I think that there's a weird offshoot chance of it being to do with the Corridors of Time, given that both us and Saint have some relevance there, but I don't necessarily think that Bungie would drop this right then and there in an episode. What I think is that with some of the rumblings of what's going on in the narrative, that we're likely to actually return to Venus briefly. And why is that? Well, I think that there's going to be a lot of stuff to do with the Ishtar Collective and the Vex, and, well, Venus is chock full of stuff to do with them. You have the Ishtar Academy on Venus and the labs of the Ishtar Collective itself. And then you have the Vault of Glass, the Endless Steps, the Citadel on Venus. All of these are iconic Vex locations, and we've visited all of them before. Again, I'm not sure if that's what's happening, but a return to Venus would definitely be a really cool approach to this too. There are people who've played Destiny 2, but not Destiny 1, and for them, they will have seen very little of Venus itself. Probably only the entrance to the Vault of Glass if they've played that raid in Destiny 2's reimagining of it. The lush jungles between the Endless Steps and the Ishtar Academy, the strange and inscrutable heights of the Citadel and the Vex construction, the wasted rocky crags near the Simics Fell where the Fallen live. This is all cool stuff that some people will just never have explored. And even if we get to visit a part of Venus briefly, even if we only get to visit one of these locations, it'll be really cool to see Bungie bring that back, especially if it ties into the narrative in a really strong manner. Whatever that most storied location is, I look forward to exploring it greatly. The only thing I think we can be sure of is that we must have visited this location once before, because we are revisiting it. So this isn't going to be something crazy and new. We're not going to be exploring the Vex Forge Star of Volantis 2082 or something. We are going to have been here before. So that does limit the number of places this can be. Maybe if it's of serious interest, we can do a live stream talking about this brief mission to this destination or this visit to it. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Again, it certainly won't be 10 hours, but I will see what this is and I will greatly anticipate it because they teased that us lorehounds are really going to enjoy it. Next up, in the first of the battlegrounds we note that the cistern has now properly drained out and changed. The Radiolaria is being redirected to the center of Nessus. The reason why isn't clear, but, well, we travel through 3 different battlegrounds as we go deeper into Nessus's core, and at that point we will start to uncover more and more of it. That is part of the key story. Inevitably, the redirection of the Radiolaria has to do with the Conductor. The Fallen are also here, making an appearance within the first battleground, being led by a Baron of the House of Dusk, and according to Allison, the reason why they're here is because they also know about the Echo and they also want it. We're seeing the Echoes evolve into something of an arms race across multiple factions as a sort of hunt for a powerful object that can change the fates of all sorts of people. And that makes sense. The power vacuum that's been left by the Witness is substantial, and all sorts of factions are rising to try and fill that vacuum. The Fallen here are also seeing the new weird Vex tendencies, and, well, the fact that the Vex are acting with individuality is puzzling them as much as it's puzzling us. Act 2 apparently also promises to show us why the Vex are acting with more individuality, which is something that Allison picked up on as well, which likely gives us more of a note as to what's going on with the Conductor and their vision for the Vex and the future. During the battleground, we also head down into the Well of Flame, and it's here that there's a note about the way these battlegrounds flow into each other. Apparently, the first battleground takes us down into the Well of Flame where it ends, the second battleground then picks up where the first one ended, and the third battleground will pick up where the second one ended. So as the story progresses, the battlegrounds will get deeper and deeper into Nessus, and eventually they will bring us to the depths of the narrative as well. That's a neat little way of showing off the journey into Nessus. I like what they're doing with that. It's pretty neat. I'm also intrigued to see what's in that battleground number 3 because it's the bit we really didn't get to see. And honestly, I don't think we got to see much of Battleground 2, given that at the time being there was a lot of stuff where everyone was in menus. But it is worth noting that each of them is in their own bespoke space. These are new places where, as you go down, there will be new architecture around that you've not seen. New spaces had to be built out for this, and I like that. It means that we've actually got something bespoke here. Yeah, sure, it's all Vex architecture, but this is a Vex planetoid. What did you expect? Moving onwards from that, Allison Lurs once again talked about acts and how they have a well-defined structure, and that the narratives of each episode being broken into 3 acts helps to define those structures a lot better. Much as the story of Nessus revolves around our descent into its deeper reaches so we can discover its secrets and find out what's going on with the Conductor, the narrative also takes a descending tone, where it starts as a light-hearted romp across Nessus with Failsafe and Saint and Osiris, and descends into a darker story where Saint is questioning his own personhood as we continue onwards. That's actually really neat to see, and I hope they utilize that. When we see all 3 acts of Echoes, we will be able to understand the real impact that that's had. Overall, I think the reaction to this livestream has generally been pretty good, but I think that overall the quick turnaround on narrative feedback is the real positive on my end of things. Even as I tweeted about the livestream, the Destiny 2 Twitter responded to me and said they were looking forward to more feedback. And I know at this moment in time that not everyone is 100% happy with what's going on in Destiny overall. I feel like there's been a general vibe, however, where Bungie has been responding to feedback a lot more quickly and actively. There's a lot of communication going on with the game, and sure, PvP in particular has some pain points. Iron Banner, the continual dominance of Prismatic Hunter. Yeah, sure, definitely some things to focus on. But, I mean, only a few weeks ago we were talking about the problems of things like the Speaker's Sight, and whilst Kvostov still has some bits and pieces where it's reigning supreme, it's still gotten a balance pass within the time that people have been talking about it. That's pretty quick turnaround times, and it means that we can actually look to feedback more generally. Lots of the different things that are wrong with the game have been addressed really quickly, and I like the way that Bungie is continuing to do this. This feels like the continuation of the Bungie that we started to see back in March with Guardian Games and April with Into the Light. It's a lot of consistent communications and some really quick fixes. Let's hope that they keep this up in particular, because for me, whilst yes, the narrative changes are a huge positive, and I think that the experiment is a welcome one, In particular, the nice thing is that this all comes because of the fact that Bungie has been much more openly communicating, taking that feedback and then quickly turning it into actionable stuff in-game. Yes, it's not happened universally with everyone. I know I mentioned PvP, but this makes me a lot more confident. Because, well, there was no way that they didn't make these changes because a lot of the members of the community on the narrative side of things talked about them. They made a promise, we pointed out that this wasn't exactly keeping to that promise, and they decided they would make a change, they would make an experiment on this. So that's good. I want to see more of this activity, I want to see more of this consistent feedback and improvement loop, because if this continues to work, we have a better game on our hands. This could be the start of something really awesome, and I want to see how this unfolds through future episodes and through future acts in those episodes, but for now, I'm really excited to see what's happening. So, with all of that being said, let me know what you thought of the live stream and let me know what you think going forward. In particular, let's go ahead and for one last time touch on that note of whether the seasonal delivery of once per week worked for you or whether you are excited about the new act-by-act delivery structure where you get to play all of the story at once. Knowing that it'll be a few months before we actually get to see that in action, I know this might be a bit premature, but I want to see what the initial thoughts are here and now having seen this. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed the video, go ahead and leave a like. Leave your own thoughts down below in the comments, of course, and if you want more Destiny lore content, go ahead and hit subscribe and the bell next to subscribe to turn on those email notifications. But as per usual, know that your viewership as always is quite enough for me. And that in the meantime, my name is Byf. Rodacia ad Astra. I'll see you Starside.